The Baltimore Ravens are looking to get back on track in Week 3 against the Dallas Cowboys after an 0-2 start, particularly on the offensive line. And Todd Monken had a potential unusual solution to how the Ravens can solve their woes. We talk about that. Ben Cleveland responding to John Harbaugh's comments and so much more coming up next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every day. Free and available for you, all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe. Just hit 8,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel. So shout out to everybody who is tuned in once, tunes in every single day in the video side of things. It really means a lot. And we're on the up and up here on Locked On Ravens, plus in audio form. You can find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts, and that community grows every single day as well. Really appreciate the audio listeners. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Here with me today on this Purple Friday ahead of Week 3 is Sam Njoku, the host of Ravens Talk Podcast. And Sam, been a tough couple weeks for this team. You know, they lose by a toe on that Isaiah Likely catch that was not a catch in Week 1. You expect to bounce back in Week 2. And then they just kind of beat themselves over and over again en route to a very disappointing Las Vegas loss. How are you feeling about this team through 2 weeks?
Man, the Ravens are really finding ways to lose. I can tell you that. A toe this week, first week, and then now in Week 2, you lose by giving up a fourth quarter lead. Let's hope that the trend doesn't continue in Week 3.
Yeah, it needs to, because I know, look, the stats on the 0-2 teams since the league expanded its season, there have been 32 teams that have started 0-2. Just 2 of those teams have made the playoffs, the 2022 Cincinnati Bengals and the 2023 Houston Texans. So, look, history maybe not be on the Ravens side, but it will definitely not be on their side if they start 0-3. They have a big week this week against the Dallas Cowboys. And Sam, we can just jump right into it here, because the offensive line for this Ravens team, we talked about it before the season. Everybody was talking about it before the season, was a big question mark and looked kind of iffy. And it has certainly lived up to that iffy tag. John Harbaugh calling it inconsistent and somehow still sticking with some of these guys on here, despite the film and the tape maybe showing they should go in other directions. Through 2 weeks on a panic level meter, 1 being you're not panicked at all, 10 being the sky is falling on this unit. Where are you?
I'm about a 7. And listen, if the Ravens had this 5 and there was no clear solution on the roster, it'd be at an 11. I'd be terrified. But knowing that the Ravens have replacements that are clearly better than who's out there right now, and that sooner or later you have to think that John Harbaugh will make that switch, either coming from his coaching staff, from the players, or from up above with the owners, with the owner being Steve Bisciotti, then you just assume that that change is coming. So I'm at a 7 right now because it looks like he's going to continue to be stubborn, but clock is ticking. So I just have to assume that sooner or later this gets fixed internally.
Yeah, it has to. And again, I don't think either of us, Sam, are saying that Ben Cleveland is a Pro Bowl, all-pro offensive lineman or anything of the sort, but if he can just be a replacement level player, which Daniel Falele is currently not playing like right now. Kevin Zeitler, by the way, playing like a Pro Bowler, which we already knew. We know Kevin Zeitler's a Pro Bowler, and again, that one kind of stings to see over there in Detroit. But this team needs answers there fast. And Todd Monken on Thursday, Sam, was obviously asked a lot of questions about this offensive line, asked a lot about the team in general, and there was a question about, hey, you guys are committed to using Daniel Falele. But last year, sometimes, and we saw this, the Ravens would put in Ben Cleveland, particularly on the right side, as that 6th offensive lineman, a lot more heavy looks in there. And so we've seen that across the league. It's not necessarily a thing that's never being used across all 32 teams. And when Todd Monken was asked about it, he said that could potentially factor in, and said that, look, the guys are good football players. I'm not able to get them all on the field at the same time, but this could be a little workaround, Sam, kind of unusual. I'm not saying they're going to just line up 6 offensive linemen on every single play and just call it a day, but would you be open to them showing more 6 offensive lineman looks, particularly in those heavy sets as they look to get their run game going?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. I mean, I watched the film in week 2 against the Raiders, and there were a lot of times when they were in max protection, but they had guys like Patrick Ricard on one side and Isaiah Likely or Charlie Kolar on the other side. And you saw a situation in which Isaiah Likely was whiffing on a block to Max Crosby that almost led to a sack. So these type of things probably led to them potentially doing that. I don't think it's a bad idea, but again, as you mentioned, that's not going to solve the issue. I think it's just in those obvious run situations, red zone, potentially. We saw something of that effect when Derrick Henry was in the Wildcat. So I think there's a chance that the Ravens could get success with that, but it doesn't really solve the elephant in the room. Maybe just sprinkles a little bit of seasoning on that.
Yeah, and I think, look, I mean, if Ben Cleveland's out there as a 6th offensive lineman and Daniel Falele gets beaten so badly that the guys in the offensive backfield, doesn't matter if there are 10 offensive linemen out there. The play result is the same. So you got to play your best guys. But again, with the rotation and with Falele, it just doesn't seem, it seems like they just don't want to react or overreact in their mind too quickly and give guys chances. And it almost is beginning to look like if they continue to start Falele and don't go to Rosengarden full time, it's almost like a sunken cost fallacy where it's like, oh, well, we kind of committed to this guy, but the other guy might be better, but we already committed to this guy, so we have to wait a little bit. I mean, look, play your best guys. I mean, John Harbaugh said it, you got to play your best guys. Now, shout out to Jonas Schaefer of the Baltimore Bandit because he put some numbers behind the 6 offensive linemen and just what it looked like last year, because we saw it last year, Sam. 21 plays for the Ravens last season with 6 offensive linemen, according to True Media, and they averaged 3.1 yards per play on those plays with a success rate of 47.6. And then we've seen a bunch of teams do it this year as well. As I mentioned, 12 teams have run at least one play out of that 6 offensive lineman grouping, that extra offensive line grouping this season. The success rate of those plays are 40%, and that is actually between the 20-yard lines, and that isn't about also the 41.3% that comes between the 20s as well there. But the Cowboys, the big thing with this week 3 game, we'll talk about this throughout the show, but the Cowboys don't have a very strong run defense. They're beat up on the defensive line. And if you want to establish that ground game, I wouldn't be opposed to seeing that, especially if you want to put Rosengarden in and put McCary as the 6th offensive lineman. You want to put Cleveland as the 6th offensive lineman. You want to rotate those guys in. That, to me, is a proper rotation with the 6th offensive lineman. The starting tackle rotation, I'm still not on board with that.
Yeah, and I look at the film. Rosengarden just shined in the film, and when he had the chance to get on the film against the Raiders. So I thought it was definitely a good sight if you're a Ravens fan to see Rosengarden have success after struggling a little bit in week 1. Again, he's a rookie in a hostile environment, season opener of the regular season for the National Football League. So I could see him whiffing on that attempt. But week 2, he looked very good. So it's nice to see that. But as you mentioned, I mean, we got to get the best guys out there. If you can find a way to get at least Rosengarden, when I think, based on the film that I saw, I'd be surprised if Rosengarden is not having a more prominent role on this offensive line in week 3. As you mentioned, the rotation is it's too much. There's no cohesiveness, as you know, being an offensive line. It's like a dance, having 5 guys, knowing who you are, knowing who the guy next to you is, how they're going to perform, and being able to double team and switch off and things of that nature. So I'm not a fan of the rotation. Get your best 5 guys out there.
Yeah, I don't think it's a viable strategy for winning a Super Bowl. I don't see it at all. And we're going to get to that in the second part of the show because a former NFL star had something to say about that as well. But before we get into our first break, I do want to ask you about one more Todd Monken quote. We saw him. He was asked about the offensive line, asked about the offense in general. And Sam, Todd Monken here is saying, quote, we're paid to have success, and I think we're heading in the right direction. I really do. We're close. We really are. We're a couple of plays away from being 2-0. We're not. That's the nature of this league. How do we find those little percentage points to get better? That's our job. And so you see Todd Monken saying we're a couple plays away from being 2-0. Well, Sam, me being a little shorter, I'm a couple inches away from maybe of having a professional basketball career. I mean, we all could be a couple X away from Y or whatever it may be. People, look, I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, although it is true in a sense of, look, if Isaiah Likely's toe is down, could they be 1-0 right now? If the Ravens don't have a couple calls not go their way or a couple of sacks not happen on Lamar Jackson, could that Raiders game have gone a different way as well? But again, it's just this common mantra for this team of blowing late leads, not being able to execute down the stretch, and beating themselves, which has a lot of people concerned where this isn't the first time we've seen this dance. This is the 9th, 10th, 11th time in the past couple of years we've seen it. That's the big concern. So when Todd Monken says this, sure, they might be a couple plays away from being 2-0, but we've said that for the last couple of years based off of self-inflicted mistakes.
Yeah, and it's coach speak. He's in the John Harbaugh tree, so not surprising to hear him talk like that. But the fact of the matter is the Ravens are getting these yardages. They're doing well offensively at times in spite of the play of their offensive line, not because of it, and because of the cohesiveness or lack thereof in the defense as far as being able to contain 10-point leads and hold it and contain their star receivers on the opposite side. And that's the reason why you're losing these games. And the Cowboys have a star receiver by the name of CeeDee Lamb who's limited today, but who knows what he's going to be able to do if he gets on the game with the likes of Brandon Stevens and Marlon Humphrey. So I think that the Ravens need to, we understand as fans that, yes, they are a toe away and a missed field goal away, sack away for potentially winning these games. But the fact is there are glaring holes that these teams will continue to abuse and take advantage of. And you have Micah Parsons, Trey Hendrickson, Von Miller with the Bills. It's just, it's going to be tough unless they get their act together.
Yep, no rest for this Baltimore Ravens team, particularly on that offensive line with those pass rushers, as you mentioned. Coming up in the second part of the show, we mentioned Ben Cleveland, and we've talked about John Harbaugh's comments surrounding Ben Cleveland over the course of this week. Well, Ben Cleveland responded, and we'll talk about what he had to say and a lot more coming up next year on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. And you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and I love going on FanDuel, seeing everything they have to offer. We have something a little different for you now through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon on a market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel any time. So for the Ravens and Cowboys in Week 3, the Ravens opened up as 1.5-point favorites in that game. So if you like that line, head over to FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com. Download America's #1 sportsbook. You're back our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher and Sam Njoku still talking with you on this Purple Friday ahead of the Ravens and Cowboys Week 3 matchup. Sam, potential for that one to be game of the week. What do you think?
Oh, it's going to be the game of the week, I think, by far. These two teams are both fighting for wins. Of course, the Cowboys have one, but the Ravens are definitely fighting for a win, and it's going to be in Dallas. Jerry Jones land, as I like to call it, and it's just two marquee quarterbacks going at it toe-to-toe, both with Super Bowl aspirations internally, no matter what we think on the outside. So they're going to be fighting for this win, and I'm looking forward to watching it.
Yep, Jerry's world. It is Jerry's world down there, so we're going to see how it all unfolds. But look, Dallas wants to get momentum in that NFC East division with Philadelphia and try to, keep pace with them. So 2-1 would go a big way, but if that's the case, Baltimore falling to 0-3, that is catastrophic if the Ravens fall to 0-3, especially with a schedule that is pretty relentless throughout the entire season. And again, it all comes back to the offensive line. It all starts up front for an offense, run blocking, pass protection. And Ben Cleveland certainly has the vote of the fan base right now to start at the right guard position. And you said it best. John Harbaugh has he invested in a backup guard, and he has the fan base. He has the fan base united over it, and had some pretty blunt comments, I'd say, Sam, about Ben Cleveland and Daniel Falele. I do want to preface by saying he did say he loved Ben and made sure to compliment him in the answer, but I'll pull up the graphic, what we've been talking about all week. This is what John Harbaugh had to say. If Ben had earned the job, he'd be the starting right guard. You look at the tape, he didn't beat out Daniel. Ben knows what he needs to do if he wants playing time or evaluation right now. It's that Daniel outplayed Ben, just facts, straight up. Also in that said that he has to know how to practice as well in terms of, he knows how he has to go out there and practice. He knows he has to go out there and play a certain way. I don't know, Sam, if this is just a effort thing. I know there have been rumblings and rumors over the years that, Cleveland hasn't necessarily worked as hard as some of the others on the roster, and, his work ethic might be a little not as good as others, but not every single Ravens player, Sam, has had a good work ethic over the course of their Ravens tenure. Marcus Peters is a guy that, decided he didn't want to tackle sometimes and let guys run past him sometimes. And he was never benched. He was never taken out of the game. I don't think this can be a pick and choose type situation, especially when there is such a need for quality play. And even if it's not, again, all Pro Bowl level play from Ben Cleveland, it has to be better than what we've seen from Daniel Falele.
Yeah, and I just that press conference really irritated me. It just showed how stubborn John Harbaugh is going to be on this. You could tell by the way he answered the question that he was expecting it, meaning that he's heard the rumblings from the fan base and probably from some guys within the locker room and maybe the coaching staff even. This is definitely a deal where it looks like Ben Cleveland's in the doghouse. How long you plan on keeping this guy here in that doghouse is, I know, anyone's guess, but you tell us to watch the film to see that he got beat by Daniel Falele. I've watched the film. I've seen every snap in preseason, every snap in the regular season over the last 2 years. There is nothing to see but Ben Cleveland clearly being better than Daniel Falele. Now, if Daniel Falele switches back to tackle, maybe here's the case. He has a big frame. He definitely has a lot of potential in that size and power that he imposes on defenders. But as far as speed, being nimble, understanding when stunts are coming, how to disengage from a block and go into another player's view to potentially stop a would-be sack, it's no contest. Ben Cleveland is clearly the guy, and I think that what you said is true. I think it's more of an effort thing, being able to practice, and maybe John Harbaugh just had enough of it and said, hey, you don't deserve to be playing as a Raven until you get your act together. And we could be watching a lesson being learned here from Ben Cleveland and John Harbaugh, courtesy of an 0-2 start, but can he afford to teach that lesson going 0-3? I do not think so. So we'll see.
No. 0-3 would be disastrous. And I guess that there's the whole mantra, Sam, play like a Raven. I guess now practice like a Raven is now what you gotta throw that in there as well. So again, you see Daniel Falele, they're first of all, a contending team is experimenting with putting a guy out of position. Falele is not a guard, and I think we've seen that over the first couple of weeks. He can't get to his spots on his pulls. We've seen multiple times where he just doesn't get there quickly enough, and a guy just shoots through the gap and gets a tackle for loss. We've seen him lose one-on-ones to free rushing safeties like Javon Merrick, who ended up just, juking him out a little bit, and Falele was caught lunging forward, hands out, just can't get his hands on him. Obviously, on the Crosby stunt, that's the biggest play we've been talking about this entire week, where he just shuffles his feet and can't get there quickly enough. Crosby just runs on Lamar's face, and Charlie Kolar was breaking open on the left side of the field. Lamar can't get it there because Max Crosby is picking him up and throwing him on the ground. So at this point, Sam, I'd be lying to you if I'd say I wasn't a little concerned about Lamar in this whole situation, because look, these hits he's taking, this isn't about Lamar. It's about, the offensive line, the more he gets hit and the more he gets sacked, that's dangerous, especially on that Crosby play where he was in the air on that one.
Yeah. I think this is a case where Lamar Jackson may need to be vocal and get into that head of John Harbaugh or the offensive line coach or whoever and say, hey, listen, I am in danger. We cannot afford to get myself injured. We saw whenever Lamar Jackson is on the field, if he's out for the rest of the season or a few games, the Ravens struggle to make the postseason or have an effective postseason run without him. So this is a case where Lamar Jackson needs to step up and, hey, say, look, I'm in danger here. That Max Crosby blitz that was not picked up effectively by Daniel Falele, it looked like Lamar was surprised to see him. I mean, it happened so quickly. He did not have a chance to even brace himself for the impact. So I think it's a case where if you're a Ravens fan, definitely be concerned about the health of your quarterback because he cannot continue to take hits like this.
And we saw the picture that was taken where Lamar, with Max Crosby in his face, he's kind of like, really? Yeah. He's getting taken down to the ground. He's like, really? This is happening again. So it's like that Simpsons meme, I'm in danger or whatever it is. So I feel like that's how Lamar feels. But Ben Cleveland did end up responding to John Harbaugh's blunt comments via the Baltimore Sun. So I'm going to pull up that graphic here and put your reading glasses on because it's a lot of words. So I'll read it out here. Quote, there weren't a whole lot of right guard reps taken by me during training camp just because of injury and all the above. So just staying ready for when my number gets called to go in and play. I feel like I've been my most consistent and most proactive throughout camp. It's been a struggle having to move around positions with injuries and stuff like that. But as far as adapting to other positions and just playing where I'm asked, I feel like I've been extremely consistent and competitive. So again, that coming from the Baltimore Sun. And Sam, Ben Cleveland has a couple different points right there. One, they did have a lot of injuries. And Ben Cleveland, he was at center. He was at right tackle. They were moving him all across the offensive line, which honestly kind of was a tell because I feel like if you'd want to start a guy at right guard, you'd want to play him at right guard in the preseason and in practice. So it felt like that's where I kind of was like, oh, they might be all in on this whole Daniel Falele thing. But it must be tough for Ben Cleveland, thinking that he's been really good and was good in practices over the course of training camp and not really being rewarded from that. Obviously, it's great to have versatility, and the more you can do is great, but they don't need a setter. They have Tyler Linderbaum. They don't need a right tackle. Should be Roger Rosengarden, but even if not, it's Patrick McCary, whoever you want to put out there. They don't need Ben Cleveland in that spot. But even if he just gets placed at right guard, we've seen him in that spot before. He was great at the end of the season for them last year. I feel like, while Cleveland, this answer was definitely not anything of like he's bashing anybody. I think it was a very respectful answer here by Ben Cleveland. But, you can't help but feel that this has to be a little frustrating for him at the very least.
Oh, yeah, I feel for him. I mentioned it. I am emotionally invested in the backup guard. He's probably the second most popular Raven in Baltimore right now, next to Lamar Jackson. It's just definitely disheartening to hear him talk like that. And he's correct. We talked about it throughout camp. He wasn't getting a lot of action at right guard. He was backing up at center. He played well when he backed up center as well. He's had time at right tackle. So it's definitely tough to hear him say that, especially considering John Harbaugh's comments about him losing the competition. What competition? He didn't have a chance to compete. So we're, as fans, are going off of what we saw last season and the years prior and what we're seeing now from Daniel Vallely. So definitely good on Ben Cleveland to not go ahead and bash his coach. I think if he was a little, up there as far as talent and stature, if he was like a Pro Bowl right guard not getting a chance to play, I think you might see a little more visceral energy from him. But because of the fact that, he's your basic backup guard, run-in-the-mill guard, and, he doesn't want to shake any feathers or cause any distractions for the team. He definitely had a great answer, so I'm very happy with the way he responded. But I'll speak for you, Ben. You need to be out there on the field for sure. Get your act together, John. Get Ben in there, and let's win some football games.
Yeah, let's win some football games. I almost compare this to the Steelers quarterback position last season, where that position was actively costing them games, where the defense was playing well enough. They had skill position players doing their thing, but the quarterback play was so terrible that they lost multiple different games because of that sole thing. Yeah. And so they needed just somebody and anybody to give them just a little bit more competent play. Didn't have to be prime Tom Brady or prime Patrick Mahomes coming in there, but just someone a little bit competent. And Justin Fields, despite the fact that Pittsburgh's only scored one touchdown this year, they haven't lost games because of their quarterback spot. He's done just enough to keep him in the game, and Pittsburgh's defense has essentially done the rest. So now with this Baltimore offensive line room, it's like, well, you're losing games because Daniel Vallely can't block properly, and it's setting them back, and you're getting in 2nd and 19s late in the game after you could be driving down the field. That is actively losing them games. Do they need Marshall Yanda to bulk back up and come back out and be prime Hall of Fame Marshall Yanda out here? I'd love it, but that's not happening. They just need a competent player. Doesn't have to be a Pro Bowler, doesn't have to be an All-Pro, doesn't even have to be great, but they just need little bit just better. You're right. Decent. That's exactly the word. That you're 100%. Decent is the word. Just decent player. I think we'll see a lot of different results. But coming up with the final part of the show, we'll flip a little bit, talk about that Ravens and Cowboys game. Plus, we'll wrap up our offensive line conversation with what Chris Long had to say about the Ravens offensive line rotation and that Roger Rosengarden question. Stay tuned. We'll talk about a lot next here on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. So 1 Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on PrizePicks every week in September. That's right, only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss this deal on PrizePicks because it's gone when September ends. Plus, PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my pick hits, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. So for the Ravens and Cowboys game, if you like more on Zay Flowers receiving yards, more on Mark Andrews receiving yards, you can get in on that action on PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. We're back. Our final segment, Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher and Sam Njoku still with you on this Purple Friday. Appreciate everybody for tuning in today, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, your first listen each and every day. Be sure to, again, subscribe in video form and audio form. We bring you 5 days a week of Ravens content, plus more. We'll have a bonus episode for you tomorrow on Saturday, our game day episode on Sunday morning. Then we'll be back for an instant reaction after the Ravens, hopefully, we can all say, please, the Ravens win against Dallas in week 3. But Sam, let's wrap up our offensive line conversation with another kind of pretty big question for Baltimore, and that is what we've talked about with Roger Rosengarden and Patrick McCary. Chris Long on his podcast ended up talking a lot about Rosengarden himself, as well as just the overall what a rotation can do to an offensive lineman, to a team, and had all the praise in the world and more for Roger Rosengarden. Said he ended up watching that week 2 game between the Ravens and Las Vegas and said, quote, this guy Rosengarden, he comes in and I'm like, is he blocking Max Crosby a little bit? Then they yank him. When he's in, nothing catastrophic happens. What I saw was a guy who's ready to play. I think that's what the whole fan base is saying, Sam. McCary is a guy that we know is a super sub. He can play all over the line. He's a great guy to have on this team. But the tape doesn't lie here. After that shaky performance in week 1, like you said, Roger Rosengarden put it all out on film in week 2. And to me, he absolutely deserves that full-time spot.
Man, and Chris Long said it perfectly. I mean, what else can I say other than yes? He just shined at film. He just looked like a bona fide right tackle, maybe even a future left tackle. I mean, when all things are said and done. I mean, he just has the talent. He understood the assignment. He didn't seem too frazzled out there. He definitely had the athleticism to match Max Crosby's. It just seems like everyone is saying the same thing, but the Ravens aren't listening. So that's why I'm of the belief that sooner or later the Ravens are going to have to make a change. I mean, everybody sees it. So, but I'm good on Roger Rosengarden to get that positive play, positive game on his belt, build his confidence. I know it's tough being a rookie. Facing off against Chris Jones and Max Crosby in back-to-back weeks has to suck if you're a right tackle. And as we mentioned, there's a slew of other pass rushers coming up next, and you're in a team that has Super Bowl aspirations. So very good job by Rosengarden. I do not expect this to last very long from him. He's not in the doghouse. I think the Ravens just had a mindset of let's slowly bring him along. But time's running out. Get the guy out there and go win some games. Like I said, go win some games.
Yeah, go win some games. And Chris Long also talked about just the rotation in general and rotating in McCary and Rosengarden together and said, quote, that's not normal to rotate tackles. It can actually throw players off. And again, he said this is something that can change the way the offense operates in terms of just putting Rosengarden in and having him be the full-time guy there. You don't have to worry about that. I think it's a big vote of confidence for Rosengarden in general because, again, it's almost the conversation and the question of, like, if you're a rookie and you go out there and you stonewall one of the best pass rushers in the league and you're feeling good, you're feeling confident, having momentum, and then your coach comes up to you and says, all right, get back to the bench. You're done for a couple series. That's like, you're punishing a guy for doing nothing wrong. And that to me doesn't send the right message. So I agree with Chris Long here. I know, Sam, you do as well, where, look, we've rarely seen teams do this to the level that the Ravens do it. It was the first time I'd ever seen them do it starting last season, just to that level. But it's not normal. We've both said that they can't win a Super Bowl that way. And I agree, it can throw players off in terms of just getting momentum. I think it's a big thing they need to change.
Yeah, and I mentioned it earlier. It's like a dance. I mean, switching partners every now and then and not understanding, getting confused about what he's supposed to do, maybe his tendencies, his likes. It's just not fair to Daniel Falele or whoever's playing that right guard as well to have a right tackle switch over on and off again, especially when you're got the hot hand, you know what you're doing, you're feeling good, and Rosengarden, and then to get yanked and put back on the bench. For the rest of the game, almost, it felt like, and putting McCary in, who struggled again. So it just didn't make any sense. I think the game plan of theirs, I understand it on a logical sense, but watching the film, it's clear that Rosengarden deserves to be the starting right tackle, and I would be surprised, shocked, if he wasn't starting on Sunday.
Yeah. John Harbaugh hinted a little bit about how definitely did some good things, and they still want to work both McCary and Rosengarden in. Maybe with John Harbaugh's competitive spirit and he does not like to tell anybody anything about this stuff. Maybe we do get kind of a full Roger Rosengarden game and no one is expecting it. But moving on to the Cowboys for a couple minutes here. Injury report for Thursday. Bunch of players return to practice for the Ravens, including Kyle Hamilton, Ronnie Stanley, Kyle Van Noy. Good news all around for the Ravens there. Stanley and Van Noy both upgraded and did not participate to full, so that's a good sign for them.
Okay.
David Ajabo ended up actually being added to the report with a quad injury. He was limited, so that's something to monitor as well. And Deontay Hardy popped up on the injury report both Wednesday and Thursday with a calf injury, so obviously something to monitor. The only person who missed practice for the Ravens was Salah, who was dealing with a personal thing. He's been out the last 2 days here. But, Sam, I think when you're talking about the keys to victory here, the first thing you have to start with is the offensive line play. You have to have good offensive line play. We've spent this entire episode essentially talking about it. Good offensive line play for this team is the first key for me. The second one, I'd love to see him commit to play action. The Ravens ran just 12.8% of their plays as play action in week 2. I think we've seen in both weeks 1 and 2 that Baltimore has had a lot of success while doing it, freezing linebackers, making edge players make decisions on who to take. And we saw it especially in week 1. There were textbook scenarios of how the Ravens can use play action. Then finally, obviously, the big one, late game execution. I don't think anybody in Baltimore is going to feel safe if the Ravens are up by 10 in the fourth quarter early. They're going to need to see some big execution down the stretch. What are some of the keys you have, or do you pretty much agree that offensive line, play action, and late game execution are the need to focus on?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with all 3 of these. I think number 1, of course, is O-line play. You got Micah Parsons. Even though the Cowboys are struggling right now, stopping the run, you still have a disruptor in Micah Parsons that can come in and disrupt even rushing plays if he gets his hands on or not get his hands on Daniel Falele or Voorhees. So I think O-line play has to improve. If you do have the guys out there, Falele and Makari, let's just hope that they have a better game than they had the last 2 weeks. So that would be my number 1. Number 2, the play action. I think the play action is a bonus right now. I can see why they decide not to use the play action as much, because they're not getting much success blocking, and you could disrupt some things or cause turnovers by having your back to the line if a pass rusher coming at you. So I get it, but there are other ways to get play action without turning your back on the guy. They do a lot of read option stuff, and that can some bows and benefits to getting that play action going and freezing those defenders, as you mentioned. So I think they have to get that going a little bit, especially with the lack of run defense that the Cowboys have. You'll expect that the defensive coordinator will bring extra guys to try and supplant that, which will lead to some one-on-one matchups on the outside. So play action is definitely as much. And then, late round execution. You need to make sure in the fourth quarter you're holding and containing leads. Don't take your foot off the gas. Don't be too aggressive either with the blitz, and then leave your guys in open space, especially with the likes of CeeDee Lamb potentially being available and playing. And that connection with Dak Prescott is pretty big, but the Ravens defense can hold that fourth quarter lead to get it. I think Ravens fans will be much, much happier and not have their blood pressure through the roof after another contest.
The heart is never still when watching the Baltimore Ravens or even the Orioles. Baltimore sports right now is it's pretty hard to watch in terms of just a nice, relaxing game. There hasn't been a lot of that over the course of the last couple of weeks for Baltimore sports. But some players to watch. Surprise, surprise, Daniel Falele pops up as the best one for me and the number 1 priority. But I am curious, Sam, about Marlon Humphrey. CeeDee Lamb, he did not practice on Wednesday, was limited on Thursday with an ankle injury. The Cowboys expect both him and Trevon Diggs to play in this game, but we'll obviously see how that develops. But CeeDee Lamb's someone who goes in the slot a lot. So I'm curious to see if Marlon Humphrey follows him there. Do they try to put other players on him? How do the Ravens cover CeeDee Lamb? And is Marlon Humphrey the guy that kind of goes with him when he goes in the slot? And that obviously will determine maybe if Nate Wiggins plays, if they can use some other guys. Jalen Armour Davis was another one of those guys back at practice. And then Kyle Hamilton, been a little banged up, obviously, the shoulder, the back. Has kind of struggled, at least from Kyle Hamilton's standards, to start the year. Yeah. So I think that those 3 are the ones that, your stars obviously have to step up. But then obviously for guys like Falele, just don't lose the Ravens the game, and that's the key.
Yeah, I think that's the number 1 guy right there. And I'll add Voorhees in there just to give Falele some much needed break in terms of criticism. Yeah, the interior linemen need to step up and step up big. Make sure that Micah Parsons isn't getting the free rush to the quarterback. And you mentioned Marlon Humphrey. I fully expect him to shadow CeeDee Lamb the majority of the game. I think they'll bring in some guys. If Nate Wiggins plays, I would love to see how he performs in the slot. And a slew of guys can come in, but I know linebackers. I don't want to see any linebackers in there or even safeties if you're not Kyle Hamilton. Even Kyle Hamilton, I think, will be a little bit of a mismatch. Get your known cover guys on CeeDee Lamb and make sure that he's not just single coverage, double coverage and triple coverage. Make sure everything's aligned to contain him, because if they get the connection going, it could be a long day. And another guy who I think may be somebody to watch is Odafe Oweh. I loved what I've seen from him. David Ajabo's obviously with the quad injury may not be able at 100%, but those two have really stepped it up. I like what I see from them. Definitely a step in the right direction, along with Kyle Van Noy, who seems like he's picking up where he left off, which may be the surprise of the season. I did not think he would be as potent of a pass rusher as he was last year, but he's proven me wrong. He's been pretty stellar.
Yeah, fractured orbital bone and all. Kyle Van Noy going out there and doing his thing. I agree with you, man. It's extremely impressive. So, final score for me, I'm going to go with a Ravens win. I'm going to go 27-23, close game. I just think for me, this Dallas run defense is something. This can be a momentum game for the Ravens. They obviously have been trying to figure out how to utilize Derrick Henry effectively and trying to figure out where the best spots are to use him, when to work Justice Hill into the game. But this Cowboys defensive line is hurting. Mozzie Smith has not practiced on both Wednesday and Thursdays. We record this, so it seems like he will probably be out. The Cowboys struggled against the Saints in the run game on Sunday. So, I mean, look, Alvin Kamara had 4 touchdowns. I would love to see a Derrick Henry 4-touchdown game. I'm going 27-23. I have confidence in this Ravens team. If they fall to 0-3, the confidence quickly wavers for me. But how are you feeling about it in general, Sam?
I'm right there with you. I think John Harbaugh cannot let this team go on 3. He'll do whatever it takes to do what he has to do to get this team a win. As you mentioned, the run defense of the Cowboys is poor, and you can't have a poor run defense against this Ravens team, even though this offensive line has struggled. They still have Derrick Henry. They still have Lamar Jackson. Even Justice Hill has the potential to break out. So I'm going to go 27-26 Ravens. I think it'll be a close game, but I'm going to give the edge to the Baltimore Ravens. Again, that run defense is going to be something to watch. I don't think that you can win against the Ravens without a good run defense. But as you mentioned, Michael Parsons is a disruptor. He can get in there and wreak some havoc. So the Ravens need to make sure they have a game plan to contain him. They didn't have a game plan that was effective against Max Crosby. So hopefully this time they do so. I get the Ravens the 1-point edge in the win to move on to 1-2.
Hey, give me in that scenario, Justin Tucker, 51-yard field goal to win it. You know, with all the conversation around Tuck and everything, the struggles from 50+, that would be kind of poetic based off of all those struggles that we've seen. So sign me up for that one. But this is a must-win game. I mean, their backs are against the wall here, where 0-3 is 10 times worse than any conversation we can have about 0-2. So it's a game that if they fall to 0-3, I wouldn't even know where to start, although we'd have to start somewhere, wouldn't we? We kind of do this for, we do this a lot. We got to talk about this team, so we have to find a way to talk about it. Sam, I appreciate you, though. Thanks so much for hopping on. Please tell people where they can find you and what you're working on as we get ready for the game.
Sure. You can find me on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, Ravens Talk Podcast show. We air bi-weekly, twice a week to get you ready for the games. We also have a special Pivotal Moments on YouTube. It's all 22 access. We look at the pivotal moments from each game, and something just posted this week regarding the offensive line, so go ahead and check it out. You can find me on Instagram at Ravens Talk Podcast, Twitter X at Ravens Talk Pod for all your Ravens news.
Yep, and the links to Sam's work in the description, so be sure to follow, subscribe, and keep up with Sam as he brings you great Ravens content. Sam, appreciate you as always for hopping on, and thank you to everybody for watching and listening to Locked On Ravens today. We will be back here tomorrow with a bonus episode talking about current and former players continuing to roast this Baltimore Ravens team with their 0-2 start in mind there. So be sure to stay tuned. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.